Welcome to the Market Mindset. We are the hub for news, results, and CEO interviews focusing the junior commodities sector. We provide market analysis and perspective that will help position you for solid returns. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can help support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and clicking the notification bell. For more info, you can visit our website. All links are in the description below. Now let's get into today's video.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Market Mindset. Today, we're joined by co-founder and CEO of Anfield Energy, Corey Diaz. And we've had him on the show a number of times. And I think you'll remember that Corey Diaz and Anfield, they're involved in energy metal exploration, but more specifically in the uranium and vanadium space, but also near-term production. So we don't see a lot of that in the junior space, but near-term production, specifically with uranium, but really becoming a top-tier energy-related fuel supplier. And that's critical today as we're talking a lot about energy. Corey, I know you're back from a site visit. How did it go? How's everything going? Plus, you've got a big addition to the board, a chairman of the board. Lots of good news in a very ugly market.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you letting me on again. Obviously enjoy these interviews, and yeah, we've been very busy. The market has kind of gone upside down, but I think that we're making steady progress in what we're doing. Managed to get down to site. It's been a bit tricky trying to get down to the U.S. Given COVID restrictions, etc. So this was the first time to really go and show the asset off to some analysts who have an interest in uranium. So we went by the mill. We also went up to the mines up in Colorado, the West Slope properties. And they showed quite well, and we're very proud of what we have. And we wanted to demonstrate how easy it would be for us to get back into production. The mill, is pretty clean. Certainly needs some refurbishment work, but the standing structure, licensed, permitted, constructed. Just need to spend some money on it to get it to operating status, and obviously engage the state to move our license to that level. But the mines themselves, they show quite well. The adits are still there. There's equipment. There's 4,000 tons of material sitting within the mines themselves, and not a lot of capex to open those back up. And speaking of our chairman, Ken Mashinsky joined our board. He is a veteran of the nuclear space. He is a former president of Cotter Corporation, from which we bought both the Charlie asset and the West Slope asset. So he has intimate familiarity with these assets and was running the show when those last produced. So he knows what it would take to get those up and running and how we should be producing from those mines. So that's very important. Secondly, he ran and he was president of Quasar, which is a subsidiary of General Atomics, a uranium producer down in Australia, which produced 5 million pounds per year. So he has that production experience and familiarity. So I think that's positive for us too, and complements what else we have on our board. And then finally, he has been on the management committee of ConverDyn, which is a conversion facility here in the US. And I think importantly, understands the supply chain when it comes to, moving from uranium to conversion, enrichment, and ultimately to fabrication. So he's very familiar with the entire supply chain. And so we think it's a coup. He's one of the, prominent players in the sector, and I don't think we could have found somebody better to fit onto our board.
Yeah, I always say to people, when you're looking at a company, look at the management, look at the team they put together, and look at the board. And when you can draw someone of that caliber on, and with those specific skill sets, it shows what direction the company's going. So right. It's a big announcement. And once again, we always say a price of a stock might reflect what's happening, or it may not. Today, the markets are so crazy. It's great to be able to touch base with so many companies that are pushing forward and hitting their milestones and continuing with the business plan, regardless of entire political events and structural events within our supply chain. This is a huge win to have Mr. Mashinsky on board, but not only on board, but on the board as chairman. And this is going to help with all of those aspects. And I imagine too, he's gone through so much of the political speaking, with all of these different developments as well, of how to approach a state or federal government in regards to conveying that kind of message and making the points to getting things done a bit faster than the normal.
Absolutely. He has a lot of experience engaging the government for government-related contracts, both within the uranium and energy space, but he also, as part of General Atomics, which is a weapons defense manufacturer, having to get contracts in place with, several departments of the government, lobbying certain parts of the government in order to see projects through. So, that's another great angle for us to, potentially leverage, his relationships within the government sphere. So, I think it's, he's one of the probably, less known players in the sector, but he is a significant player in the sector, and we are so happy that he accepted, joining our board, because I think that, he can bring us to, help us move to another level, given his expertise and experience, and certainly he complements everything that we already have, within our board and management.
And it's so important too. I believe he was on the tour as well. Did he come down on the tour with the analysts? Because
he did.
It's such a difference. I mean, you can watch video, you can take video of a site, and you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. But it's not until you get there, and an analyst and even someone like Mr. Cheminsky, when you can get around and you can walk the property, you can see the formation, you can see all of that. It makes it a total difference. To spend some time on the actual property to visualize how this is going to flow, how it's going to work. So it was great that you're able to do that and to have some success with it too. And I just, for the average listener, they may not think it's that big a deal. Like, oh, well, can't you just look at the site and see, it's like, no, it's a big difference.
Absolutely. Being on site, understanding, how we'd like to, move forward with production, watching the production flow within the mill, because they're all the aspects of production are reflected within the mill structure itself. So it helps to, whether it's an analyst, even, anyone who's interested in the business, understanding the production flow. We can walk through all of the equipment still there. Some of it requires updating, but, we could walk through the mill in such a way that we can see how the product would flow from, from outside all the way to the back end when it's created. So the yellow cake's created. So I think it's very important that parties who really have an interest get to see a facility like that. There aren't that many out there, so the idea that you can go in and see a facility, I think it's very important and advantageous. So another thing about Ken on the board, he's a big proponent of vanadium. He's a big proponent of rare earths. He's been involved. He was involved with General Atomics with regard to creating a rare earths business. And so these are things that we could potentially look at as offshoots for our company. So it's not just about what we have here today, but it's also looking to the future to see what other opportunities there may be, within our portfolio that we could take advantage of.
Yeah, and we've talked about before. I'm a huge fan of both rare earth and vanadium. It gets a bit more news than it used to, but the average person doesn't realize how critical on the list of critical metals is right up there. Those are so key in all the things that we do, and having that in the portfolio is a huge bonus. But also having someone like that who can convey to politicians, especially in this kind of transition that we're doing. I think it's critical that they know how to navigate a system. They know how to convey a message, because a lot of times that is a big stumbling block, is that people are seeing we're here, we want to get to here, and we're in an energy crisis among other crises. Is having experience and having that kind of knowledge base is critical, and how to even have the conversation with different strategic partners or stakeholders is always challenging.
Absolutely. And, Ken has had a lot of experience, through his not only time with Cotter, but with General Atomics in general, working at a number of different subsidiaries, procuring assets for specific, subsidiaries, looking at M&A opportunities within other subsidiaries, working for, the strategic planning operations at the corporate level. I think it's so important. He's got he's had a vision that he's been following for over 30 years at Cotter, and sorry, not just at Cotter, but at General Atomics. And I think, that experience will certainly flow down into what we're looking to do moving forward.
Now, the one thing that I like to remind people is that Anfield Energy is sitting in a very unique situation. And we talk about it all the time, but I forget there's always new viewers. Maybe remind people what's so unique, not only with the projects, but you have a mill.
Yeah, I think it's
It's a big deal.
I think it's important to remind any viewers that there are only 3 licensed, permitted, and constructed conventional uranium mills in the United States. We own one of those 3. And that's a critical thing because back in the 80s, there were over 40 of them. And, over time and with low uranium prices and concerns, environmentalists, who have, didn't have an interest in seeing these properties thrive, certainly they've been shut down. And so we're left with 3. So very critical and very important to note that we are, one of 3 holding a property like this in the United States. Secondly, we have properties and our mantra has always been, let's find properties that have resource on them already, past produced, or have, either historic resource or current resource in place. And so we're not doing a lot of exploration. So we're in a position to advance assets quickly. So with the mill being constructed, with assets which can get into production relatively quickly, for example, West Slope and Velvet Wood, we're trying to put ourselves in a position when the time comes that we can act very quickly and get into production. So that is the critical path for a company like Anfield. We don't do exploration because, in our view, the cycle for uranium is relatively short. It could be a 10-year cycle. If you're looking to explore within that 10 years, you may not get to the point where you can sign a contract, to sustain your production over a greater than 10-year period. So it's a bit challenging. And certainly you're trying to sign contracts with utilities as an explorer only. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to secure anything because they want to see material flowing into their coffers. They want to understand that they're mitigating risk by signing contracts, but they're taking on greater risk if they're assuming that an explorer can get into production, in a relative term where they would need the material. So from our perspective, we're always looking at more advanced assets to get us to a point where we can produce much more quickly, and that's kind of critical to our path forward.
Now to shift a little bit, because I like to always remind people there's always ever changing nowadays of why the politics factor is so critical today, because what's happening in Russia, what's happening with China in regards to the shift, but just relationships are changing quickly out there. And to a lot of people, they think, oh, well, politics is boring. And yeah, a lot of times it can be if it's just, safe standard times and it's nitpicking over small interests. But now today, it's a very different story. And we see, because of the commodities being controlled by certain groups, and we have, global trade shifting and changing and alliances shifting and changing. What's happening in this market that is either troubling or very exciting?
Well, it can be both.
Yeah.
There is obviously some troubling aspects related to Russia and Ukraine, the talk of nuclear weapons being deployed. I think that's, a big concern, and obviously driving some of the policy changes within the U.S. government. The Secretary Granholm has mentioned, the possibility of sanctions related to nuclear fuel. That is one that may or may not happen, but certainly that creates a higher risk for U.S. utilities, for example, looking to secure fuel for, their businesses. But I think at the same time, it's important to remember that the utilities have significant inventory and tend to carry 2 to 3 years worth of inventory. So there could be an adjustment period should that actually, come to pass. But these are the conversations that are taking place now, which, hadn't taken place, a year ago. Certainly it wasn't really on the radar, but, certainly we're kind of at the point where, these things are being taken in earnest. So, that's in some ways disturbing, but at the same time opportunistic for other players. Also, in order to get an enrichment, you require uranium to be converted and then, that material to be, enriched. So certainly it bodes well for, players outside of that sphere. I think even within that sphere, again, when we talk about Kazakhstan, the fact that, China has, kind of looked to partner with Kazakhstan to help it potentially transition away from Russian influence in some shape or form. Certainly, whether that's altruistic or not, it's certainly opportunistic for China to secure supply of material when they're looking to build 10 reactors a year. So that's pretty significant, and once again significant in a way that the material may start flowing east as opposed to flowing west. And once again, so that could potentially drive up the price of uranium or the scarcity of uranium flowing into the Western market. So there are lots of moving, bits and pieces. I think uranium is kind of unique in that regard, that we do have the political so tied to the physical in some ways that you can't ignore one if you're looking to understand the market. So from that perspective, I think that there's a lot of, there's still a lot of intrigue to come. I think a lot of decisions to be made, but certainly I think all of it still boils down to the fact that, there's a huge opportunity for players in the US, certainly uranium producers or near producers. And so, we're excited from that perspective. Obviously, we'd like to see, war ended. We'd like to see things somewhat normalized in terms of, Ukraine being able to exert influence over its own country. But at the same time, in the interim, things happen. And so we have to be prepared to deal with, whatever that fallout may be.
Yeah, and I think it's so critical too, in the sense that regardless, and hopefully the war and the fighting comes to an end sooner than later, but alliances and allegiances may have been shifted now forever. We don't know, but there's a lot of things, moving parts. And I think if nothing else, the last year or two has shown that we need to have a reliance on our own assets. And we have assets. I mean, you have assets that can be deployed if the government were to really say, hey, can we do this? Yeah, we can start moving. Let's go. And I think that hopefully, regardless of what political spectrum you're on, is that both sides will recognize a need for that energy independence and to get towards a cleaner, greener kind of world. There's a very clear, obvious, winner right now in uranium and in nuclear that we could turn to, that we don't need to spend time with the technology of like, can we get the turbines and wind farms to get this much energy? Do we have intermittency? We don't have to worry about that. We can get there right now, and we have to get there if we're going to talk green. We have to include nuclear. So hopefully there's been a wake up and a reawakening of nuclear to a lot of the West.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see it reflected in news related to Belgium. Belgium just shut down a plant and is looking to find a way to restart it. Germany is looking at the possibility of restarting reactors there, despite the fact that they've all been shuttered. Japan is looking to turn on reactors. We've already talked about China. So it's clear that, embracing nuclear as, kind of a green energy, clean energy source is, being reflected in a number of different places, and certainly being exacerbated by the fact that, there's no gas coming through the pipelines, from Russia. So need to find another source, which is independent of, state actors who may not be acting in the best interests of, other parties, within Europe or elsewhere.
So what's the time frame here? I think it's important when we're talking to a lot of generalists and a lot of people that are newly getting excited and interested in not only mining, but in energy. What's the time frame? Because we've got a lot shorter time frames nowadays, people in our heads. We've seen technology, grow at rapid rates, and people think that, 3 months might be long or 6 months might be long. What should someone who's looking at Anfield as an investment consider as an appropriate time frame to kind of chart against?
Sure. Look, I think one thing we should remember is that mining is hard. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to speed. Certainly, if you're looking at speed, you may lose quality somewhere else. So there are definitely trade-offs. But I think it's important to note that if you're looking at starting up a mining operation, in particular uranium, because of the regulatory nature, you may be looking at kind of a 7 to 10 year time frame to get from conception to construction and production. But I think as I mentioned before, we target assets which are already advanced. So, for example, we have a constructed mill, and we have assets which have past produced, relatively recently, such as the Westlow properties, which produced in the 2006-2007 timeframe, very low cap to get into production. So we're looking at, I think the bottleneck for us is the mill, and the mill is probably a 24 to 30 month timeframe, and that includes engaging with the state to advance the asset and move the license from its current standby status to operational status. But then there's also the idea of longer lead times for certain parts of the mill, which would be required, and certainly given the disruption to supply chains more recently, that we've looked to incorporate that risk into our time model. So, we think that, the 24 to 30 month time frame is reasonable. The whole aim here is that we'd have stockpile material coming out of assets like West Slope or Velvet Wood that we could quickly send through the mill once it's up and constructed. We also have stockpiles at the mill already and ready to go through the mill. We have stockpiles at Velvet Wood, for which we could do the same. So we do think we'll have a significant flow of material. Even within the mines at West Slope, there's materials, 4,000 tons of material, which can be pulled out and shipped to the mill too. So there's lots of material, and certainly we'll be stockpiling ahead of that 24 to 30 month time frame, so we can just jump right into production.
Excellent. Well, thanks for this update. Once again, kudos and congratulations on attracting Mr. Mashinsky as chairman of the board. That is a big step, and well done. And I'm glad that the site tour was a big success. It's always great to have analysts come down to see the vision and see where this can be built out to. So well done. We look forward to any other news that comes out as we keep just going through this entire shift. We really appreciate it, Corey.
Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.